It's a write-off.
The show where we talk about business, taxes, and all the decisions that seemed like a good idea at the time.
I'm Trevor.
And I'm Joel.
Let's see what we're writing off this week.
Looks like we're talking about travel. I'm in the office. You're obviously not in the office. What are you doing? Where are you?
So I'm sitting in Las Vegas, Nevada right now, in our hotel room. So we're here for the AI CPA Engage conference, and we get to have the pleasure of being here on behalf of Avan Tax. So we get to talk tax, wealth management, kind of the interplay between tax and wealth. So we're talking to other CPAs, doing a little CPE, a little networking, just kind of trying to get out and meet some colleagues.
Gotcha. Yeah, it sounds like you had a night out of dinners and some different things with people last night too, huh? Networking.
Yeah, so we kicked off yesterday. The keynote speaker, Ryan Reynolds, and my personal favorite, the CFO of Costco, kicked off the conference with a bang, and ultimately we, hitting the expo hall and checking out all the new technology, meeting with colleagues, got to really visit on everything that's going on with what we're doing with the van tax, and speaking to other CPAs about that. So it's been a good time so far. It's not just it's mostly work, but there's a little play in there, and so that's usually where it kind of comes into is, can we write this off? And so I think in this case, it's pretty obvious that I think we get to. But clients are constantly asking, can I write this off? Can I take the travel? How do we kind of go about doing that? So,
Well, it sounds like that's what we want to talk about today. And yeah, is it a write off or it's a write off? And asking that question, is it or isn't? And how do we do it the right way? Right? How do we have the
right.
documentation? How do we have the file behind it to back up what we're doing? For those that don't know, Trevor is probably the biggest Costco fan that I know. So were you kind of geeking out about that? Did you get an autograph or any
I,
swag
I,
you can bring back to us?
I was sitting next to him in the lobby actually of the
Really?
area, and I did not have my Costco card for him to sign. It's a big regret that I have in my life, but it's all good. So, but
That is a
uh, but
missed
let's
opportunity for sure.
it's a missed opportunity for sure. So let's
Yeah,
talk
you
about
also
what.
mentioned Avan Tax and
Mhm.
kind of who you're there with and those things. So I think we'll probably maybe end with learn a little bit more about that and the relationship there and and
Sure.
and how that is a mutually beneficial thing between our firm and the financial wealth planning aspect of some of what we do as well. But let's jump into the travel part of it. So
Mhm.
it's a write off travel. Obviously, that's usually going to be a business expense, but there's a lot of caveats to that. So where do you want to
Yeah.
start with that?
I mean, let's start with what makes the trip deductible, right? So it's got to have a legitimate business purpose. Got to have documentation. It's got to primarily be for business. So, the classic examples like, can I write off my flight? Can I write off my hotel, conference registration, Uber to the conference, that type of thing? Obviously, and that's generally going to be a yes, right? You're here for conference. You're here for continuing education. You got to get here. You got to stay somewhere here. So that's generally going to be a yes. But can you deduct your gambling losses while you're here on a conference? In Vegas. What about the entertainment? What about the show you might want
Yeah,
to
what
go
about seeing
to?
a show? Something like that.
Typically it's not going to work. It's entertainment, but what happens if you're entertaining clients? What happens? But entertainment's not deductible. So, there are some fringe cases where you can, but if you're wining and dining somebody, maybe the meal can, half of the
Yep.
meal, 50% deductible, some of those situations. But if you want to take, if you want to take somebody to, the Magic Mike show, you're not going to be able to write that off potentially. So I'm sorry, Joel, we're just not going to be able to do it. But the IRS doesn't care why you're in Vegas. Like they don't care that you're in Vegas. They care why you're in Vegas. So that's that's
Okay.
that's really you got to be able to back it up overall.
What about the situation? So you talked about entertainment, and I can't write off my Magic Mike show if I'm taking clients there necessarily. But what
Right.
about your team? A lot of people are traveling there, maybe even at the event you're at, where they're bringing the office out there for team building and for them to have learning and those type of things behind that. If it's say it's maybe not a Magic Mike show, but some other type of entertainment using air quotes there with that and that's more of the team building side. Is there an aspect of that could be considered?
Yeah, there are some fringe cases where if you have like a team building event or it's clearly a party for the entire team, the entire staff, rank and file employees, you are able to deduct some of those aspects of it, especially from like a party building, especially when you're off site. So if you're off site, you can possibly be able to do all that. I mean, really, it just comes down to the purposes and the facts and circumstances. So I think the real case is just like making sure before you take off to go do some of those things, you properly document some of this, some of the, like the purpose, that who's going to be there. If it's just owner group, maybe not. If it's everybody on the team, there's aspects of that. So really comes down to just the facts and circumstances on that situation. So it's my classic CPA answer of it depends. But in the end, if you're taking the whole team, it's a team building event. Um, there's entertainment components to it. There's meal components to it. There's an aspect of that that is deductible. So you kind of just have to run through the scenario and figure out what was the primary purpose of what was driving the event and whether or not you can deduct it. So it's one of those frustrating kind of answers, but really what we try to get with our clients is we try to build out an itinerary before we go out to the event. I know we have to let life happen, but if we can be planning for the trip and we want to ask these questions ahead of time, we can make sure that we're documenting it properly. We keep the proper receipts and we keep the right, obviously pictures and photos and some of the substantive evidence that just shows that we're doing this. This isn't just a one and done kind of thing. That's what we try to work with our clients on, is just being a little more proactive and intentional about making the trip so that we can make sure that we're properly representing them and making sure that it's a write-off.
Gotcha. So from the firm's perspective, what we're helping a lot of those clients who have that question is telling them how to properly document that for us, so that we can do that work for them on the back end,
Mhm.
and back up that file. You had mentioned pictures and those type of things. Are you talking about pictures of receipts and the activity that you may have been doing, the meeting or what have you? What about like an
Yeah.
agenda or meeting notes, stuff like that?
Absolutely, yeah. If you can take, if you, I mean, if it's going to be team building around like an annual meeting or something along those lines, absolutely. Agenda, itineraries, all of those different things. Just photos of the team having fun, being together, picture at dinner, picture at the event, something that you're doing. Those always help because again, the IRS is going to. They don't care that you're in Las Vegas. They care why you're here. They don't care that you're on the trip. They care why you're on the trip. And so, if you can show that as being a ordinary and necessary, reasonable business expense, that's what's going to help you be able to back up this expense, especially because if it ends up being a relatively large, like if you're flying an entire team out to Las Vegas for a conference, it makes sense that you're also going to probably go do some events together as a team. You want to make sure you have good ground to stand on. So it's not just some ticket that you bought and you and your spouse went out to, or you and your buddies went out to, something along those lines. And there's a lot of people here. Like last night, I went to dinner with a couple people that we work with on the vendor side, and they obviously paid for dinner for a group of about 15 of us. And I'm sure they're wondering, no, can I write this off? And so it's making sure you have all the right type of things ahead of it. So, yeah,
Yeah, I wonder who their accounting firm is that they used for their business stuff. That's another question for another time. We won't. Maybe if we
it's the
get one of them
wrong
on here,
one.
we can about that.
It's the wrong one since it's not us. So it's on you. Um, but yeah,
Does
no, I mean,
that
at
brings
the
up
end of
another
the,
question I have? Go ahead. Go ahead.
no, no, go for it.
I got so you had said if you bring out a whole big team, right? Or does so that could be a large expense. Does the size of the expense, if it's travel, does that mean that we need to have different types or more detailed documentation or any of that kind of backup behind that expense? If depending on, does it get into different variations based on the amount being spent?
No, I mean, you need to have good hygiene either way, overall and for how you document it. And, you need to build up the muscle memory to properly know how to document these things, how to position them and how to ultimately stand by them at the end of the day. So I wouldn't say the size necessarily matters. You're going to want to have evidence across the board, whether it's $1,000 or $10,000. Again, the business purpose is going to hold true there, making sure that it was necessary and part of overall your it wasn't just, especially if there's this illusion or this potential aspect of, is it and is it, if it's personally enjoyable, if there's a component of fun or entertainment to it. Las Vegas has been a really cool town. We enjoy being here, but like at the same time, like we are here for business. So, and frankly, that's why we're filming this podcast, Joel. it's a write off, and I'm making sure that we're working on this. So, hey,
There
it
you
all
go.
comes full circle
We got
here.
our
You
own
know what I mean?
documentation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is video
Awesome.
documentation that we're here doing it right. But no,
Right.
the size doesn't matter. It's it's not the size. It's not the size of the deduction. It's how you use it.
I got you.
So that's just how you got to just build up the right muscle memory.
Very good. And so that's something that, with a shameless plug here for our firm, is that part of our onboarding process and then our subsequent kind of quarterly meetings that we have with tax planning clients, we're reminding them of this process, asking them if they have trips coming up, and reminding them to help us help them by having that documentation in place, and just kind of reminding them of the do's, don'ts, and the proper way to get us that information so that we can continue to build that file out for
Yeah.
them.
There's a lot of bad information out there too. Like there's so much bad info out there, social media, TikTok, some of the tax column influencers, if you will.
Yep.
There's so much just bad, bad, just advice spilling around there. So yeah, that's why
Is
we
it
work with
clickbait?
folks.
Is it's for people to click on it
Yeah,
and watch the quick
yeah,
video, right?
here's the big tag right off your trip to Disney World, make it a business expense.
Mm,
I mean, there's so many aspects of that stuff that gets really dirty. So if we're talking with our clients, like you said, sometimes the answer isn't. It's not 100% deductible. Sometimes we have to take a business use percentage. Sometimes we take a pro rata percentage. There's sometimes the answer is not 100% yes. Our job is to find
right.
the yes, but we also want to make sure that we're representing our client in the most effective way that we can actually stand up and validate these things. So that's why we want to do it in such a more proactive way. So
Gotcha. The same thing hold true for, I see a lot of our clients who are having corporate retreats, or they'll have events that are offsite, usually involving some sort of travel, where they'll go for their annual planning or their end of year planning, and those type of things. Do you want to speak on that at all, and kind of how we make sure that that's tied out in the right way?
yeah, I mean, it goes back to it too. We want to have an agenda. We want to have a purpose. Like clients are also always asking, like, how do I write off a retreat? So they rent a house in Colorado or something like that. Take all the leadership team out there for a few days as a deductible. And I mean, it just depends on what we're actually doing in those few days or what we're doing on that retreat. So clear business agenda, employee training, strategic planning sessions, team building activities there, leadership meetings. We want to document all that, but factors that will hurt you, I know for a we know that will hurt you is you don't have an agenda. It's family focused. You're just bringing out the wife and kids, or you're bringing out the family, predominantly doing recreational activities, and little to no business is conducted. So, you want to be able to, what does a good trip look like ultimately? You're bringing management, leadership, other members of the team. You're doing annual, quarterly, or ongoing business planning. If you subscribe to a certain operating system, you can usually do these kind of getaways and these retreats or something like that from a business side, focusing on strategic initiatives that you want to roll out and all that kind of thing. But what's a bad retreat is it's owner, spouse, kids. You happen to go to a beach house. You did a business meeting for an hour or two, and then you took 4 days of vacation, right? So that doesn't always work, right? There's also little aspects too of like you can bookend your travel. That's always kind of an interesting little scenario too. If you do it, if you do it properly, where you work on Thursday, Friday, and then you work again on Monday, but you had to stay there over the weekend in order to do that work on Monday. That's also another type of strategy that can work in some cases too, where you can actually get a little bit longer of a trip because you had to bookend it by working certain days on that trip. No, you have to make sure you actually need to work those days. And it's not just you choosing to work on Monday instead of Friday. So, but yeah, no, it's always one of those things where, I mean, travel's expensive, but it's also a very necessary aspect of business in a lot of cases. So again, we just want to make sure that we have the good reasoning, good rationale, good documentation, good planning, good evidence, so that way we can ultimately, probably like feel confident in how we're going to write this off.
Right. I think another no comes down to kids and paying for their travel, and their entertainment or anything else that they have going on. That's not
Mhm.
necessarily got to be deductible in any situation. Am I correct with that statement? for the most part?
Very rarely, especially if they're younger children. I don't care what anybody says about putting your kids on a board of directors or a board of advisors. I don't think my 3 year old's going to be able to give a whole lot of input on my scenario. So no, in those cases, we just need to make sure that you're deducting anybody who's actually working in the business. In our kids
Right,
aspect, if they do come, it's just a component that should not be deductible. So I don't think
right.
it's one of those things where anybody who's trying to make an argument that little, it just or in that way, it's just exposing themselves overall to to judgment.
I think something to call out too that you kind of said there was it's not a yes or a no. There can be a combination of both, and what I mean by that is there can be
Mhm.
a business component of that that you do write off, and then there can be a personal or family component, vacation component that you do
Mhm.
not write off, and those expenses are completely separate, and
Right,
that's okay. You can have one and the other at the same
right.
time, not the same
Sure.
time maybe, but on the same travel trip, if you will.
Right.
Um, as long as you distinguish between the 2. Is that, kind of an accurate statement
Yeah.
to what you alluded to?
Yeah, yeah, and for a business trip, it needs to be predominantly business, so we need to make sure most of our trip is around business. It's not like I go on a vacation, I work 1 day, like, that wasn't predominantly a business trip, or just because you go to a beach house and do work, did you have to go to that beach house and do work? Could you have done it in your office? Could you have had those meetings somewhere else? So there's aspects of that, we all understand that in some cases we have like, I'd prefer not to have to go to Las Vegas, but that's where a conference is, right? I like my house, but at the same time, like this is where I have to be today. So, in that case, then I think it's pretty clear that this is necessary. Now, if my kids were here or something like that, and we decided to go do something, that would be a component that shouldn't be written off on my business. However, I can still bring them. It doesn't, I still have to have a hotel. Like there's still aspects of that that's still necessary for me to be able to do my job here.
Right.
But that doesn't necessarily mean we get to get 100% of it.
Makes sense, makes sense.
Yeah.
Anything else on travel and doing that properly that we kinda haven't covered here that you think you wanted to kind of
No, there's
bring?
I mean, I think there's a lot of topics that we can dive into in a deeper way, but I think the main thing is just kind of wanted to share some aspects of this because I'm hearing in the lobby, I'm literally sitting in the lobby waiting for a room and there's a guy on the phone talking to somebody saying, make sure you write it off. Make sure you use your business card so it's a write off. And again, IRS doesn't care that you're in Vegas. They care why you're here. So just because you write it off on your business card does not make it a business expense. So overall, like to go out and have a good time. And sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. And if you can mix the two, that's great. But at the end of the day, just don't go over aggressive. It just doesn't make sense. As much as I want to say let's write off everything. I mean, heck, it's the name of our podcast for goodness sakes, right? But I want to be able to, represent my client in the right way. So let's just do it the right way. And like, let's be real. And the fact that like trying to jump over dollars to save pennies and in writing off little bitty things that just because you can use your business card doesn't mean you should. So, I know that's not the funnest answer on earth to give, but I'm hearing it literally around this entire thing, and these are just people who are, you know, visitors to the hotel. These aren't even people at the conference. All of us are nerds. We know how to do this. But like this is just a guy sitting there trying to like, talk to a buddy while his golf bag is sitting next to him. You know what I mean? So yeah, well, I think we
He's
can dive into
networking.
it. I think we can dive into all those types of things, but again, it's why you spending money. Did it improve the business? Did it create value? Did it build wealth? Did it improve your business? And so that works a lot in a lot of cases between conferences, retreats, and it goes down into just the overall philosophy of like a lot of things that we're going to look at. And as we dive into anything, is it a write off? Because the question is, the question the client always asks us is, can I write this off? And our answer usually goes into it depends. And so let's make sure we're setting up the right framework.
I got one final question for you here on this kinda topic. Thinking about clients who don't proactively meet with their
Mhm,
advisor, their tax strategist. What
mhm.
what are they doing? What are those, people who are preparing their taxes doing? Are they just taking the whatever they're given and putting that in, putting that as an expense and moving on down the road? Or is there a big gap there that you've seen, for either new clients coming in or
Yeah.
things that you've seen kind of out in the real world there where it's not normally being done right? Because that's the kind of the feeling I have about it.
Yeah, I think there's a level of trust that some people probably mistakenly place on their clients' records, just because it says travel, just because it's classified and coded as travel by a bookkeeper or a client doesn't mean it was fully deductible. It's an area that can be scrutinized, especially depending on the business type, business structure, depending on the type of business that you are. If it's service based versus product based, some of those things don't require a lot of travel in a lot of cases. So I think a lot of folks, a lot of professionals, they'll see it and they might just take it at face level and face value and just write it off. We try to just dive a little bit deeper, but I think that's the idea. Of a lot of clients don't realize like little bitty things can ultimately make the entire deduction non-deductible, right? Like not being predominantly business focused, not having documentation, not having receipts, not having some of those things. It sounds so boring, I get it, but if you take a $15,000 trip with your team and your hotel and your airfare and all those things like that, you want to make sure that you're getting full deductibility out of that kind of thing. So that's what it comes down to. I think a lot of folks, they just see it, but like our job, not inevitably, is not just to take it and write it off as a deduction. It's to make it audit proof. It's to make it ironclad so that we can make sure that everything that we're doing. And I think if you're doing that and you learn to do it correctly, it ends up creating that habit where it just becomes habitual, where you do it correctly and you do it right and you know how to document it. And it's just part of hygiene on running a business, inevitably. Just like you wake up in the morning, you
Yeah.
get yourself ready to go to work. Like this is how you do the things that we do.
Muscle memory that you want to build up with that for
Yeah,
sure. Okay.
100%.
So you're there, I guess, representing the firm, but also working with Avan Tax. And
Right.
Avan Tax is a group that we've, I guess, partnered with, for lack of a better term. Do you want to kind of
Hmm.
talk about
Yeah.
your relationship there with them and how that works with our firm?
Yeah. So we wanted to always be able to offer wealth management and not, at the end of the day, just continue to have an advisor relationship with our clients. So we have a strategic partnership with the Tax, and our partner, Dustin Gerst there. He's our CFP, he's our wealth management team. And so we can integrate wealth management and financial planning into everything that we do. So looking at it from a tax focused lens, where we ultimately are looking at the tax efficiency of portfolios, coming to a solution that might have a tax planning solution that may have a financial planning component to it. Things like 401ks and investments and all those types of deals, tax loss harvesting. There's a number of things that we do that we always want to have to integrate or work with a financial advisor, and so we wanted to be able to do that in house so that way we can, one, make sure it's done right and give the client a high level of service. So I'm fortunate that Avantax is having us out here. I'm very thankful for that, and we can talk to more people, seeing if they want to incorporate this into their practice. It's been a game changer for us. I think it's a wonderful client experience. At the end of the day, it's just continue to add value to the client in some way. So that's what we're doing here. We got a couple more days left. We'll be down at the expo hall, just kind of doing our thing there and try not to make a fool of ourselves. But that's really what it is. It's just trying to get a CPA to think a little bit more forward and not necessarily realizing that it's not taboo to be a financial advisor or to continue helping a client, in a way that can help them build their wealth. So that's what we're here. That's
Right.
what we're all about, and it's been a huge blessing on our side, and I love what it's done for our firm, and ultimately, I just like what it does for our client relationships.
That's awesome. Yeah, I actually had a call this week while y'all are in Las Vegas, with a potential new client who had called in, and she's been working with her financial advising firm, I guess, and they couldn't really answer any of the questions about the
Hmm.
impact to her on
Yeah.
taxes, right? And she's
Right.
calling us wanting to get some of those questions answered. And I'm going, well, it's a little bit more
Hmm.
involved in that. It's not a simple yes or no, or, what are they saying? And here's the impact. It works as a single unit, right? I mean, those things kind of go hand in
Yeah.
hand. And so I explained to her kind of our value proposition behind that, and how we work
Hmm.
with Avantax and Dustin, and
Hmm.
it's that relationship. And she goes, "Man, that just makes sense, right? To
Hmm.
do it that way, rather than have two different people trying to talk through multiple emails, group emails, going back and forth, and trying to see if we
Hmm.
understand. We're all kind of aligned in the same way that way, and it adds a lot of value to the client, right?
Yeah, the integration just makes a lot of sense for a client, in my opinion. It just financial advisors typically are going to be product focused. Not always, but I'm not trying to like badmouth anybody at that situation. But sometimes clients are coming to us with very specific problems. You know, it's a tax problem or it's an estate problem, whatever the situation is. And so we want to make sure we're doing that right. They won't touch tax like financial advisors and firms. They don't touch tax the 10-foot pole. You know, from compliance
Right.
reasons between that, and so they'll often have to lean on us. But then being able to do that and speak to it and being like, you know, at the end of the day, we can do both. Like we can wear both hats, but we're always looking at it lastly with like how that tax focus ends up hitting, right? So we're always looking at it through that lens because that's typically what the clients are going to feel the most. Right? What is the point of doing something if it's going to have a tax drag on the back end? And so that's it. I mean, at the end of the day, it just adds value, makes sense to the client. It's one unified team. It's cohesive. It's you know we kind of joke with our clients that while you know they're off doing their like if you have an outside advisor and you have us, we're staying in our own lanes. But when we have it here, we're talking behind your back, you know, on a regular basis, so we can sit there and actually have conversations behind the scenes, so that we're always essentially kind of on the same page working for you. And we come to meet, we're bringing all that back together. So it's been a huge deal for us.
Would you agree that a lot of CPAs historically have kind of stayed specifically in their lane and compliance only and talking about these, how their investments impact their overall, you know, tax situation? That's kind of something they've shied away from in the most part?
Yeah, yeah, I think that's well said. I mean, I wouldn't add much to that there, but that's exactly the way it's kind of worked historically for sure.
Come on, I'm trying to get you to say something that we can make into like a hot
Sorry, man.
take or something we can put
I
on
don't need a
Instagram.
I don't need a sound bite tonight, man. Don't need a sound bite today. I'm already on thin ice here in Vegas. I don't want to test my luck. You know, I got
Yeah.
some
I was hoping you were gonna
I'm
find us some sponsors or something for the podcast out there too. Any
you know,
luck
I'll
with
work
that?
on it. We may have some of that. You know, I've got a couple things in the works for some a lot of they don't realize they're gonna be sponsors, but
Mm,
mostly we're gonna make sure that they know that we're out here and eventually see we're about manifesting sponsorships. So we're just gonna put it
right.
out there and then they'll pay us maybe at the end. So it's a reverse model, but I think it's gonna work.
Mhm. We start advertising for them and they see a big bump in sales that,
Yeah.
they've gotta tie it back to us, right?
Yeah, 100%. It's definitely gonna come from this. So yeah. But no, man, we're
Well, I
finishing
think
up
yeah,
here. Yeah, no, we got a couple more days here, so I'll do my best to make you some money, Joel.
perfect. Sounds great. I'll and hopefully you can help me try to find a way to write it off too.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. Yeah.
We'll get Dustin, Gersh, and maybe his group, maybe just him
Mhm.
on a subsequent call. I think it'd be neat to bring him in and kind of hear his perspective on that client relationship and how coming in from the CPA, coming in from the tax firm really helps
Mhm.
in my opinion, it's better than a warm referral. It's better than any of that stuff, right? Like you're coming in with
Oh,
a
yeah.
trusted advisor, and you
Yeah.
can hit the advising ground running right with that. It's not
Yeah.
a slow introduction and let's get to know you. Let's do this. Hey, we think we know what you need. What do you think? Let's talk about it as a group. Let's
Mhm.
get some options out there, and we know the impact, right?
For
Y'all can
sure.
have a conversation in the room, right, and figure things out much quicker than you could in any other type of situation. So I love that for efficiency and the client can
Mhm.
see it there happening in real time and they have an understanding and you're not having to explain it 2 or 3 times. It's everybody's on the same page and let's go type of thing.
For sure. For sure.
Cool.
Agreed.
Anything else we didn't cover you wanted to talk about? Are you headed to
That's
lunch
it.
now? Is it there?
That's
It's
it. We're heading down. We're headed downstairs. We're gonna go out there and talk. I'm gonna roast some elbows, and we're gonna try to see if we can justify our existence here on behalf of our gracious host, Avan Tax. So that's a bit about it for us, and I'll try not to lose money on the casino floor for you. That's all we can really do, and that's about it, man. We'll go. I think we can go a lot deeper into a lot of these topics too. So this is always a hot button for us. So we just kind of wanted to do it here live in the flesh, and let's talk about it. And then obviously we'll take some questions down the road from some clients, and we'll dive into some more niche topics for sure.
sounds great. All right, man. Till next time. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. See ya.